Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the internet. This is where we will be tonight, debating the movie The Debater, a movie about an IBM machine called Debater. With us tonight, we have Harry Spitzer, the director of the movie. Where are you, Harry, at the moment?
I'm coming to you from my apartment in Brooklyn, New York.
Got it. We also have Noam Slomin from IBM. He was one of the key drivers of this project. Are you here, Noam?
Yes, I can hardly hear you, but I'm here.
Okay, I will speak as loud, as clear as technically possible. Good to have you with us. Your connection seems a bit dodgy, so people might just be experiencing an avatar. Anyway, also we have Hayah Eichler, debate consultant, and also involved in the projects. And last but not least, the guy with whom you would most probably lose an argument, or should we call a debate, Harish Natarajan. Welcome. Thank you for attending. My name is Nikolaj Sonne, and I shall be moderating the talk tonight. As this is a festive occasion, I have brought my best attire. And no, I'm not wearing pants, so please don't pan down. No, this event was supposed to take place in Copenhagen. We should all have been sitting together watching the Debater movie, but alas, fate would have it that fate would have it otherwise, and now we're all here on the internet. For those of you following this debate on YouTube right now, you're more than welcome. There should be a box that you can actually type in your comments or your questions. Please feel free to use that. And since many of us tonight, well, I have, but many of the people watching might not have seen your movie, Harry. As a director, I feel that you're in a unique position to give us a 2-minute summary of your movie.
Of course.
So now I'll close my eyes and we'll rewatch the movie together.
Nikolaj, thank you very much. And also thank you for just elevating our general classiness as a panel with your I first heard about Project Debater along with my co-director, Joshua Davis. We first heard about Project Debater about 2 years ago. And what we knew about it then was that it was an AI grand challenge. At the time, what we knew about AI grand challenges were that they were these big man versus machine face-offs. We were familiar with the AI Grand Challenge of Deep Blue, which beat Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion. We knew about Watson on Jeopardy, which beat Ken Jennings, world champion. We knew about AlphaGo, which beat Lee Sedol in what is supposedly the most complex game in the world, Go. And what intrigued us about this technology, about Project Debater, was that this represented a step into a much more human, much more ambiguous, much more nuanced realm of debate, of speech and debate and human conversation. And that was fascinating to us. And in general, the idea of an AI grand challenge, which exists to forward technology and to forward the world of AI, seemed like a fascinating subject for a documentary. So what this film goes into is it kind of shows the process of bringing this technology to life. It shows the researchers and this eclectic team who worked so hard over the course of 7 years to bring this technology to life that they didn't know if it would be possible to bring AI into this new realm. And ultimately, for those of you who've watched the film, a little bit of a spoiler alert, it culminates in a face-off against Harish Natarajan, who is with us on this call, who's going to be speaking later on in this panel, who's one of the best debaters in the world. And the spoiler alert is that Harish actually beats the system. But it was a very close match. And I think what we try to convey in this film is that this still represents a massive step forward in terms of AI, in terms of technology, into a much more human realm of speech and debate. Finally, the film kind of ends by exploring a little bit of the implications of what it could mean to have an AI that can help us in our human decision-making process in the world. And, in this moment when we're seeing all of the ways that technology is changing the landscape of the entire world, including this digital premiere that we're hosting right now, it was important for us to take a little time to explore the implications of what this technology could have out in the world. And for those of you who have seen it, we hope you enjoyed it. For those of you who haven't, we hope that it will be available everywhere soon. And with that, I want to turn it back to Nikolaj for the rest of the panel.
Okay, thank you. And just to add on to that, if you haven't seen it, there should be a link downwhere in the description for the YouTube thingamajig where one can actually go and rent the movie. And then after this debate, might want to see what we're talking about. So just to give an impression, because this debating thing for me going into this project was, what is, I know a debate and a bar brawl and an argument, but what is debating? And we actually have some clips, and it's not from the movie, but it might give us an idea of what this debate form is and how it works. And Harish, I would like, if you could talk us through once we've seen the clip and tell us a bit about what's going on. If we can roll that clip, please.
Without further ado, I'd like to start the debate off with Project Debater. So Project Debater is designed by IBM Research. It will deliver a speech based on 1,100 arguments collected from union members and others over the past week. It will not be taking points of information. Project Debater, please take the floor.
The following speech is based on 570 arguments contributed by people around the globe, supporting the idea that AI will bring more harm than good.
So, Harish, what is going on here?
Right, so that debate is from the Cambridge Union back in November. The purpose of debating in general is a stylized way of arguing, which is there is a topic, and you will have people either assigned randomly or by their choice to be for or against the motion. In the form it's given, it's about being able to construct logical arguments, marshalling some evidence, though often you will lack the time to come up with lots of evidence behind it, and be able to respond to the arguments another team, or in this case, Project Debater, was making. On a more general level, I think stylized debating or competitive debating is a really interesting window into trying to understand how people argue, how we construct persuasive arguments, and how we respond to arguments. So while it isn't necessarily, as you note, the same as the arguments you will have in a boardroom, in a classroom, or in a bar, it nonetheless uses the same kinds of tools to try and make you construct arguments in the most logical way plausible, and try to persuade people through the use of logic, rhetoric, and other devices.
Mm-hmm. I would like to, just in order for us to get a better sense of what this argument might look like, if we can roll clip number 2, please.
AI will enable technology to advance and further medical research which will save lives. It will enable us to develop more and more impressive technology. While regulation and serious consideration of the concerns are in place, the benefits of AI technology are enormous and are way beyond the over-exaggerated potential harms.
And clip number 3, please.
So I don't think it escapes anyone's interest that at the heart of the debate is this: that a piece of technology can simultaneously be both terrifying and awe-inspiring. I think from Project Debater, on both sides, from my teammate, Project Debater, and from both teams, we've got elucidation of what some of those risks are. I like to agree with the previous speaker, where he notes that we should never believe that artificial intelligence does pure good. But I don't think anyone in this room would believe that. No one would believe in all contexts it would do pure good. what is important for us to be critical about artificial intelligence and understand its limitations. And debates like this are exactly when you end up in that position.
So, Harish, there's a question from Facebook, and I have a similar question, but the question is, how do you actually determine who wins a debate?
Right, so that's a very interesting question. I think there's different ways in which you can do it. On a competitive level, the question is, how well made are your arguments? How well responded to are your arguments? However, in a debate like that in the Cambridge Union, when it came to the IBM Grand Challenge debate back in February last year, it's partly the audience asking themselves, who persuaded me more? Often based on what was your original viewpoint and what is your viewpoint by the end. For many people, that may not change. In many other cases, you may well change your mind. And the question is, are you persuading people to change their minds? So there are different ways in which debates are judged. It depends partially on the context.
Mm-hmm. And as we see in the Debater movie, the question was, should we subsidize preschools? And there were sort of two categories of judgment, whether you felt enlightened or on the subject, and whether you actually move people in your arguments. And Noam, I'm really curious as to if you're with us, Noam. Are you with us?
Yes, I can hear you. I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
Okay, that is fine. No, I'm curious as to why would you undertake a project like this to come up with a machine that can eventually one day contest a human in terms of debate?
Sorry, I was not able to hear the question. Maybe Chris can type it in, and I can try and answer.
Okay, so I will move on to Hayah, and you can answer, I guess, to some of those points at least. You work with Debater. Could you describe how you work with the technology and some of the difficulties of making a machine capable of debate?
Sure.
Go
ahead, Noam.
I cannot hear you guys. This is unfortunate.
My part in this whole process is less the technical aspect. So what I was doing was more talking to the technical team at IBM and very much coaching them in the way that I would coach high school debaters and university debaters, and saying, these are the problematic areas that we had in a certain debate, in the previous debate. How can we try and make it better? They would then translate that into computer things that I can't elaborate on. But what was very interesting to me was that the process was very similar to the process of training a human in terms of what are the initial steps that you need to take. You know, the initial arguments in a first speech always get better faster than the later speeches where rebuttal is more important. And that to me was very interesting to see how the technology really mimicked how you would coach humans as well.
Mm-hmm. And Hayah, you also mentioned in the movie that you see clear similarities between your own kids and this machine. Could you elaborate and the development of that? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I think mostly there I'm referring to the sort of personality issue, how kids develop a personality very early on. And when you see it in real time, it's interesting to see a person develop, the ability to tell a joke, for example. And I saw the same thing with Project Debater, where the first few debates I had, you could tell it still wasn't as formed a personality. It still had trouble making certain arguments or realizing where it was in its speech and maybe presenting the wrong side of an argument, much like my kids often negotiate the wrong side of what they want. But then you get to a point where the speeches were so coherent and it was making jokes that were having the audience laugh because it was funny and it had a bit of personality and it knew how to add some zing to its speech and how to tease people during debates, and it really sort of felt like it was developing its own sense of personality. And while certain parts were maybe pre-written, it still had to choose which parts it wanted to talk about, which jokes to tell at which time, and that to me was very interesting.
So here we find ourselves in 2020 and talking about a machine having feelings and development and being a bit childlike. I'd like to go into that and go into some of the ethical questions. But before that, and this is a question, unfortunately, it seems that Noam is not able to participate at the moment.
And Nikolaj, just so that you know, we have a system now where we are messaging him the questions. So you can ask him questions and then he'll know when to respond.
Okay. So I would like Noam to talk a bit about what made him come up with this project and what the technical difficulties are and where we're going from here. Not necessarily as one answer, but as several answers. And for you viewing at home, I'm trying to keep a grip on this chat going on the side and things. There's some technical things that we are getting used to at the moment. Anyway, I would like the rest of the participants to talk on this point. In the movie, debater says it's a basic human decency, which might sound a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it seems that it has a sort of template that it's working from, and that template involves in throwing sort of a low punch. Maybe not at first, but then a low punch, and then, you know, I hear what you're saying, but you're only human, or you're talking fast. Is that a part of the debating discipline per se?
Right. So I guess I can suggest an answer to that, which is there are plenty of different ways of persuading people. And I think one of them, which in those cases the machine was to some degree repeating, is construct your argument, but at the same time, you can at least try and put down whoever you are arguing against. It isn't the only way to argue. I think there are, and I think to be fair at the same time, what you're also seeing are moments when the machine is being conciliatory, taking the best versions of what I was saying, or in other circumstances what other people have been saying. So I think it is one mode of debating and one skill which can be very useful. Not the only one, nor the only one it exhibits over at least the last year and the few times I've seen it.
Mm. And Harry, you mentioned before AlphaGo and the IBM project that beat Kasparov back in, I think it was 1997. But so it's like a recurring theme that we are developing computers to beat us in different disciplines. And it seems that about this time we're approaching at least a place where a machine can at least contest with the very best that humans can put up with. So as a broad question, where do you think this technology might go?
So to kind of first touch upon the first part of your question, which is AI grand challenges historically have been, the technology has been demonstrated in these face-offs, man versus machine. And I think that part of the reason that that's been so successful is because that's something that people can see and people can immediately understand that, oh, an AI is beating a human. That demonstrates this step forward in this technology. That demonstrates very clearly how this is an advance forward. And that's something that's very easy for people to wrap our heads around. That's part of the reason that a debate actually still worked within this framework of a grand challenge, because it is a man versus machine face-off. Although, as Harish just went into, the judging criteria is obviously a little bit more ambiguous, and it's not quite as clear cut. But that's part of the reason why these have historically been the way that AI grand challenges have manifested themselves. As far as kind of what is fascinating to me about the implications of this technology, I think from the start, something that was really interesting to me was kind of taking a look at this technology in the context of where we live right now, which is we live in somewhat polarized times. We live in times where people kind of exist in ideological echo chambers, where what we believe is often reinforced by the people around us. And the idea of having an artificial intelligence that could, in theory, surface credible arguments on either side of the debate seemed to me like it would be something that would be very, very powerful as a tool to bring people together and also allow people to potentially see other perspectives that might not be their natural go-to perspective. And the reason that technology might be helpful there is because try as we might, we're very emotional creatures, and we can have arguments presented by a human, but oftentimes if it's coming from another human, that we still might have some kind of emotional attachment and emotional bias to it. And so if you can have a system that can, in theory, surface arguments on either side of a debate, you might be able to look at those arguments a little bit more objectively and then make a decision based on that from a more informed place and a more kind of objective place with respect to the research that exists out in the world. And that was always really, really interesting to me.
Okay. Going back a bit, as all presenters are taught the first day of presenting school, you do like this when you have someone talking to you, but they're actually writing. It's just cheating. But the technical people say that Noam can answer the questions I asked before about working with debater, coming up with the idea, and a bit on the technology. Noam?
Yes, I can try and answer. I hope that you can hear me. This was back in 2011, just a few days after the demonstration of Watson in the Jeopardy event. And this was the second grand challenge by IBM Research after demonstrating Deep Blue in the 90s that was able to defeat Garry Kasparov in chess. But in 2011, after the Jeopardy demonstration, an email was sent to all the thousands of researchers in IBM across the globe, asking us what should be the next grand challenge for IBM Research. And I looked at that and I thought that this is interesting. So as I think expressed in the movie as well, I simply offered my office mate at the time to sit together and to brainstorm for 1 hour and to raise different ideas about what can be done. And at some point, I suggested this notion of developing a machine that will be able to debate humans. And we started to think about it, and the more I thought about it, it sounded more interesting to me. I think it is in this interesting spot where you don't really know if this is doable. It is clearly very, very hard, but not necessarily impossible. So I think this defines a good and interesting scientific challenge. And so we suggested that back in 2011. Eventually it was approved in 2012. And this is when we started to work, and we spent more than 6.5 years until this live debate with Harish, which is depicted in the movie.
And briefly, Harish, there's a question for you. If I can have the technical people tell me whether Noam can hear us all the time. And the question for you, Harish.
I can still hear you.
Okay, you can still hear us. Okay, beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
Harish, how did you prepare to go up against the machine?
So I had never seen Project Debate debate before. This was the first public demonstration, so I didn't really know what to expect. What I assumed, and to some degree was true, is that what it would excel at was the ability to take a large amount of information, much more than any human would have access to, be able to process that and find what is relevant from that. And it struck me before we got the debate, which I had 15 minutes to prepare, that you're never going to beat a machine or Project Debater if the way in which you approach that debate is, it will give you facts, you will respond with the facts of your own. That isn't a particularly strategic way of looking at it. So when I thought about that beforehand, it was always the question of what can I do and what is the machine likely able to do better than I can? And it was then trying to construct slightly different forms of rhetoric, being willing to concede some material and at the same time construct different kinds of arguments than what you assume the machine would or Project Debater would. What I think was interesting or difficult for me to go into that is it's never entirely clear, and I think it's true about almost any one of us, of what the limits of technology are, what it can or what it cannot achieve at this stage. And that could always set you up for a shock. And I think in many ways, what surprised me about Project Debater was it was making moral arguments. It was using rhetoric to some degree. Some of it, as Hayah noted, might have been pre-programmed, but it did all seem to be relevant. So my preparation was 50% relevant, 50% not, partly because what its capabilities were did surprise me, but it was still underlying it that you could not beat a machine trying to do what it does better than it does.
This question is directed at Noam. I hope you can hear me, and please, the rest of you guys, you're more than welcome to chime in on this. A man called Aral Belkan, he says that one should think of AI not as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence, and then ask ourselves the question, whose abilities does this machine augment? And we see AI being used for more and more things all the time. And I could imagine many interesting uses if I was in power, that I now have this machine that can debate everyone and beat everyone's arguments. So sort of criticism doesn't get to me. That might be me as a tinfoil hat, but Noam, have you thought about the potential ethical implications of the technology that you're working with?
So the system has two major sources of information. One of them is a massive collection of newspaper articles, around 400 million articles. And when the debate starts, the system is using various AI engines to search for small pieces of text that should satisfy three criteria. They should be relevant to the topic. They should be argumentative in nature. They should argue something about the topic. And they should support our side of the debate. And then the system is using other engines in order to somehow glue them together into a meaningful narrative. But in addition to that, there is another source of information for the system, and this is a collection of thousands of more principled arguments. So these are more related to values and to ethics. And these principled arguments are really it is a way to try and formalize and capture the commonalities between the many different debates that humans are having. So sometimes we can use the same argument, or at least small variations on the same argument in many different debates. So for example, if we debate whether or not to ban the sale of alcohol or whether or not to ban organ trade, in both cases, the opposition may say that if you ban something, you are at the risk of the emergence of a black market. So a black market is this kind of a principled argument that people may use in many different contexts. And these are the kind of things that we try to capture in this second source of information. And when the debate starts, the challenge is really for the system to identify the most relevant principled arguments and then use them in the right timing during the debate. And this is what provides the flavor of more, I would say, ethics and values that the system is manifesting.
Thank you. Time is running. We've had some technical difficulties, but I would like all of you to briefly answer the following. When we make these machines that are better than us, and the most, I guess, important case or example of this is AlphaGo, the machine that beat Lee Sedol back in 2016. It has changed the way that humans play AlphaGo. Do you believe that technologies like this will enhance the human capabilities of debating?
Right. So I will be happy to say something about the relation between AlphaGo and actually previous challenges and debater, because I think this is a very important and interesting point. Grand challenges for artificial intelligence are really there from day one. Back in the 50s, we had actually a researcher from IBM working on checkers, and then we had again a researcher from IBM working on backgammon, and then we had chess, and then AlphaGo. And I think these were extremely instrumental in advancing AI technology. But what is really common to all these games, that these are games, these are board games, and they are fundamentally different from debating that has an inherent subjective element. And just to give you one example of these fundamental differences, when a board game is done, we know who won the game. And this has very important implications, because this means that we can train millions of versions of the software to play one against each other. And since we know after each game who won the game, we can improve the system by that. When a debate is done, we do not always know who won the debate. It is not necessarily even clear how to define that. So we do not have this path. So we are in a different territory where humans actually are still better. And this is why we have so many open questions to explore.
Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is running out. Harry, Noam, Hayah, and Harish, thank you very much for participating. I hope that you, the audience, have enjoyed this debate, and you're more than welcome to click on a link somewhere and watch the movie. Thank you very much, and have a great night.